Hey everyone, I'm Beck and welcome back to Diving into Marvel Comics. Today we're kicking off Chapter 1 Planet X with our first Daredevil story in the Modern Era Continuity Guide, Guardian Devil. Brace yourself, it's a long episode because each issue is story heavy. More details and credits are in the description. Before we jump into the story itself, I want to spend a minute or two talking about Daredevil and some of the important history that leads into his arc. Daredevil is Matt Murdock, a lawyer from Hell's Kitchen in New York City. When he was a child, he was blinded in an accident involving radioactive chemicals. Although he lost his sight, his other senses became enhanced. You could almost say they became super senses. Okay, that was bad. Anyway, they're actually really cool, and I love watching and reading about how Matt can hear conversations from blocks away, track people by scent, and perceive the world through what is often described as a radar sense or echolocation. So basically, he's Lawyer Bat, attorney at law. After his father, a boxer named Battlin' Jack Murdock, was murdered for refusing to throw a fight, Matt dedicated his life to fighting injustice. During the day, he works as a defense attorney. At night, he protects Hell's Kitchen as Daredevil. One of the things that makes Daredevil unique among Marvel heroes isn't that he lacks typical superhero abilities like super strength or indestructible skin. I'm looking at you, Thor. But how much his Catholic faith influences his character. Many Daredevil stories focus on themes like guilt, redemption, morality, and the tension between justice and vengeance. Those themes are especially important in Guardian Devil. The most important supporting character in this story is Karen Page, Matt's longtime love interest. Note that I specified this particular story for all the Foggy lovers out there. As far as we know, Matt and Karen are together and trying to build a future with one another. Their relationship serves as the emotional foundation for much of the story. We'll also be spending time with Foggy Nelson, Matt's best friend and law partner. Foggy often provides a more grounded perspective and serves as one of Matt's closest confidants. He's also a major supporting character throughout Daredevil as a whole. One last character to discuss is Black Widow, also known as Natasha Romanoff. Back in the 1970s, Matt and Natasha had one of Daredevil's most significant romantic relationships. That relationship ended long ago, but the two remain close friends. As for Daredevil's villain gallery, two names are worth keeping in mind. The first is Wilson Fisk, better known as the Kingpin, one of the most powerful crime bosses in Marvel Comics and Daredevil's greatest enemy. The second is Bullseye, a deadly assassin capable of turning almost anything into a lethal weapon. They've got some serious beef, too. With that introduction out of the way, let's jump into Guardian Devil Issue 1. We open on a letter from Karen. It's unfortunately a breakup letter. She blames the baggage they carry for this breakup, and on the comic page, we see Matt asleep in a disheveled bed, the letter left on his desk. We then cut briefly to a maternity ward. Something tragic happens here, full of screaming and fire. From there, we jump to a 15-year-old girl named Gwyneth. She's running through the streets with a baby in her arms, and a car is pursuing them, trying to run them down. At the same time, Matt Murdock is in confession at church. As the priest continues speaking, unaware of what's happening outside, Matt suddenly picks up the heartbeats of Gwyneth and the baby. He realizes something is wrong. Immediately, he jumps into action, becoming Daredevil, and the priest is none the wiser. Next thing we see is Daredevil leaping onto the pursuing car and bringing it to a crashing stop, injuring the two guys in the car. But when he looks around, he realizes the girl's already escaped. Now, instead of a clean rescue, he's left with a problem. He's gonna have to explain to the cops why he just crashed a car. Back in his office, Matt can't stop thinking about Karen. The breakup is clearly weighing on him. For a moment, he even considers calling Natasha Romanoff for a maybe not so innocent distraction. Before the call goes through, Foggy Nelson walks in. He introduces Matt to a new client, Lydia, who's in the middle of an expensive and complicated divorce case. But then, that meeting is interrupted when Matt once again hears the heartbeat of Gwyneth and the baby. He rushes outside, trying to track them down, but he's too late, they're gone. Across the city, we see an unknown man addressing the two attackers from the earlier car chase. He's furious they failed to capture or kill the girl and the baby. At first, he seems like he might let them go, but as they step into an elevator, it floods with water and they drown. And I thought being trapped in an elevator was bad. So clearly this guy has no patience, and he's not happy that Daredevil has already become involved. As night falls, Daredevil moves across the rooftops of Hell's Kitchen. He contemplates everything, Gwyneth, Karen, the accident that gave him his abilities, and even God. He questions his purpose, faith, and whether any of it has meaning. At the same time, Gwyneth experiences a vision from God while she sleeps. Matt returns to Foggy, and they discuss Lydia's divorce case. Foggy reveals that Lydia's husband had her sterilized without her knowledge, a disturbing violation that complicates the case further. Foggy also hints that his own feelings for Lydia may be more complicated than he's willing to admit, especially with his girlfriend Liz still in the picture. Uh-oh. But again, the heartbeat of Gwyneth and the baby interrupts them. Matt suddenly stands from his seat mid-conversation, only to discover that Gwyneth is now standing at the door of his office. Inside, Gwyneth tells Matt that the baby is the result of a virgin birth. Matt listens carefully, and his senses confirm something unusual. There's no sign of deception in her heartbeat. She insists that she was guided by a vision from God, who led her to Matt, telling her that he would protect them, because he is Daredevil. Then she leaves the baby in his care. What a heavy opener, but that's the end of the first issue. Issue 2 opens with Matt doing something he is wildly unprepared for, taking care of a baby. His apartment is an absolute disaster. Baby bottles, formula, and dirty dishes are scattered everywhere. Matt is clearly running on little sleep and even less patience. In what I can only assume is a desperate cry for help, he invites Natasha Romanoff over. Natasha immediately starts poking fun at him, and even attempts to flirt a bit, but before she can get very far, Matt hands her the baby and makes a quick exit. Congratulations, Natasha, you've been tricked into babysitting. And she used to be an Avenger. Back at his office, Matt begins investigating the child's origins. His goal is to figure out who the baby's father is through recent birth records. Instead, he uncovers information about a horrific incident at St. Anthony's maternity ward. Remember that brief scene from the first issue, the one where something terrible happened, but we weren't shown exactly what? Well, maybe we should keep that in mind. Anyway, his investigation is interrupted by the arrival of Nicholas McCabe's. He's this old guy that doesn't look very menacing, but he's about to drop a bomb on Matt. He reveals that he knows about the baby and Gwyneth. More importantly, he has a very different interpretation of the situation. According to him, the baby is not the Messiah, it is the Antichrist. McCabe's asks Matt to surrender the baby so that he can destroy it. He warns that as long as the child remains in Matt's life, suffering and tragedy will continue to follow, and everyone Matt cares about will be placed in danger. So much for being a non-menacing old guy. Needless to say, Matt doesn't hand over the baby, and he kicks McCabe's out, but the old man leaves a golden cross behind. Afterwards, Matt heads out for a walk to clear his mind. As he considers everything he's learned, he briefly wonders if Kingpin might somehow be involved. But almost immediately he dismisses the idea. It's too simple. Meanwhile, Gwyneth is still on the run. She's been trying to evade the mysterious people hunting her, but she's become predictable. A man called Mr. Gabriel finally catches up to her, carries her to a waiting car, and drives away. Up on the rooftops, Daredevil continues brooding over everything that has happened. Natasha eventually arrives with the baby, and Matt decides to ask her a hypothetical question. What would she do if she had the chance to kill baby Hitler? Before Natasha can properly answer, Matt throws the baby off the roof. Natasha immediately dives after it. After that little stunt, she concludes that Matt is far too unstable to be trusted around a baby right now, so she just up and leaves. Elsewhere, Foggy escorts Lydia home after discussing her divorce case. When they arrive, Lydia invites him inside. Both of them know Foggy is currently dating Liz Osborne, but that knowledge doesn't stop what happens next. Shame, Foggy. Shame. And then we reach the final pages. Karen Page returns after 6 months away, mascara running down her cheeks. She then informs Matt that she's been diagnosed with AIDS. That wraps up issue 2. Man, and we thought the end of the first issue was heavy. Our third issue starts with Matt visiting Foggy in jail. Foggy's been arrested for Lydia's murder, and his explanation isn't exactly helping his case. According to him, Lydia invited him into her bedroom, transformed into a monster, attacked him, and then jumped out a window to her death. The murder charge is obviously a problem, but Foggy's biggest concern is that he cheated on Liz. Back at the offices of Nelson and Murdoch, reporters have swarmed the building. Matt tries to get someone working on Foggy's defense, but Rosalind Sharp, the head of the firm, shuts him down. Matt and Rosalind get into a heated argument over Foggy's situation, and he can't understand why she's refusing to help, especially since Foggy is her own son. Oh, lore drop. The confrontation escalates until Matt quits and he walks out the door. Frustrated and distracted, Matt takes to the rooftops as Daredevil. Unfortunately, he's being watched. Before he can stop a crime, he's hit with a tranquilizer dart and captured. While everything was going on in the office, Karen, currently staying at Matt's apartment following her HIV diagnosis, gets a visit from Nicholas McCabe's. He repeats his warnings to Karen and insists that the baby is the Antichrist and claims that its influence, combined with Karen's past lifestyle, is responsible for her HIV infection, which is actually so insane. He even suggests that she may have exposed Matt as well, which clearly causes her immense distress. Daredevil wakes in a strange room where he can hear absolutely nothing. For someone who relies on sound to perceive the world, it's a nightmare. When he attempts to escape, he's overwhelmed by a deafening scream. His captor then enters the room. The mysterious Mr. Gabriel introduces himself as Ba and looks like a demon. He begins speaking about angels, demons, and the child. He claims the screams belong to fallen angels and tries to convince Daredevil that the baby represents a great evil. Rather than listen to the lecture, Daredevil uses his senses to locate the source of the scream, which is a speaker, and destroys it with his billy club. Once he's not blinded by sound, he's able to escape out of a window. But his freedom is short-lived. When he crashes through the window, he falls toward the street below and lands directly in front of an oncoming truck. And that's where issue 3 ends. Thankfully, as soon as issue 4 starts, we see that Daredevil has been saved by none other than Black Widow with a baby on her back. I mean, what can't this woman do? The two talk on a rooftop for a while about how Matt's life has been falling apart, and Matt blames the baby for it. When Natasha tries to scold him and basically say, "Are you nuts? He's a baby," Daredevil attacks her in a psychotic rage, thinking she's in league with the baby. He steals the child and jumps from the roof, but injures himself in the process. He starts to realize that his thought process is all messed up, so he makes his way to one person that might be able to help, his mother, Sister Maggie. Remember that guy that got all upset about those drivers failing to get Gwyneth and then drown them in the elevator? We flash over to him, and he's all upset about Daredevil getting away with the baby once again. He's determined to break Matt and ruin his life. Although he wonders if he could have broken the arachnid this easily. Pretty sure that's a reference to Spider-Man. That's weird, right? Mystery Guy tells his pal, Mr. Gabriel, to summon the assassin, and then he walks away into the darkness. 2 days later, Matt wakes up in a strange room, without his costume. Not to worry though, his mom just washed it and put it in the closet. The discussion turns to his father, and he gets angry and starts to shout at his mother, so naturally, she slaps him to snap him out of his anger. Matt begins to talk about the events of the past week, and confesses that he's beginning to question his faith. In response, his mother tells him the story of the knight and the monk, where the knight questions the monk about how he sacrifices a lot of things in life, but what if God isn't real? And the monk answers that he supposes he would be sad, but with the knight's pillaging, drinking, and murdering, when the knight dies, what if God is real? Then she says, "Oh, by the way, there's a visitor for you downstairs, and it's Karen." So Karen shows up, and she's like, "Give me the baby, we have to take it to the old man, McCabe's." And Matt absolutely refuses and starts screaming at her about how the baby didn't make her sick, her lifestyle did, and how she has no one to blame but herself, which naturally makes Karen run away. Honestly, I wouldn't stand for that either. We snap back over to our mystery guy, and he's talking to the assassin he's hired to kidnap both the baby and Daredevil. When he leans into the light, it's none other than our harmless old man, Nicholas McCabe's. And who's that he's talking to? Well, that's revealed on the last page. Bullseye. Amazing. We're halfway through our story, and it's about to really pick up. If you've listened for this long, thank you so much. It really means a lot and makes me so happy that you're supporting this podcast as an audience member. If you haven't yet, please remember to review, follow, and maybe leave a comment if you're feeling spicy. If you have time, share this podcast to a fellow Marvel fan. Bonus points if they're specifically a Daredevil stan. All right, back to the show. The opening is pretty interesting because Matt starts talking about how his dad used to tell him stories about an ageless boogeyman who lived in the village and practiced magic. Matt has now sought this man out to find out which forces are after the baby and to get answers. The man? Dr. Strange. Strange informs Matt that the golden cross that McCabe's left during the first visit with him is actually contaminated with some synthetic toxin. It's mildly hallucinogenic and can make someone susceptible to suggestion. That's interesting. Strange continues to tell Matt that he has heard no stirrings of the next Messiah of any faith, but also says his powers have been a little unpredictable as of late. He suggests bringing him the child to investigate further. This sends Matt into a paranoid rage, thinking that he must be in on it. Immediately, Strange uses magic to purge the drug from Matt's system, causing him to think clearly for the first time in a while. So, naturally, the two geniuses decide to summon a demon to get some answers. Meanwhile, Karen reflects on her life in the park. As she walks by a discarded newspaper, she doesn't notice the murder on the front page. John Curtin, the actor, was found dead, and it's strange because his picture looks exactly like Nicholas McCabe's. Back at the sanctum, Strange basically tells Daredevil to shut up and let him handle the summoning. The demon appears, and Matt recognizes him immediately. Mephisto. Clearly, they have a history, but that's not the story we're telling today. Strange asks Mephisto very professionally about the baby, and Mephisto is like, hey, why are you being so professional? Is someone else with you? Because Strange basically put blinders on Mephisto when he summoned him, so Mephisto can't see either of them. Mephisto confesses that no, the baby is neither the Antichrist nor the next Messiah, but he does know that Daredevil is in the room with Strange, and he tells him he has a special throne for the person making his life miserable. He also casually drops that his mother is in danger before Strange closes the portal. Daredevil rushes back to the shelter and finds his mother, Sister Maggie, lying injured on the floor. The scene is an absolute massacre. Dead bodies litter the floors and pews, and Maggie says the assassin is still there. Bullseye comes out of the shadows and throws some ninja stars at Daredevil. Our man in red proceeds to block Bullseye's projectiles, so then Bullseye pulls a gun, which is totally cheating for him, and fires one bullet at Daredevil, which gets him in the shoulder. As the two men trade blows, Karen, who has been hiding in the pews, tries to sneak away with the baby, but Bullseye manages to subdue Daredevil and demands the baby. Karen trades the baby for Matt's life, except it's a fake baby. Sister Maggie is escaping with the real child. Bullseye catches Sister Maggie and is about to kill her when Karen picks up the discarded gun from the ground and threatens to shoot Bullseye. Unfortunately, the gun is empty and he pushes Karen to the ground, turns around, and starts to walk away. As a parting gift, he picks up and hurls Daredevil's discarded baton back to him, but Karen jumps in front of it. It strikes her square in the chest, and there, in the shelter, as Matt holds her, she dies. I know what you're thinking. She can't actually be dead. This is one of those fake deaths where they come back to life, right? Unfortunately, no, it's not. Karen Page is no more. Well, on to issue 6. As Matt grieves his loss, he goes through many phases. He contemplates ending it all. He lashes out and destroys his apartment in a rage. He collapses on the ground in utter anguish. And throughout it all, he relives moments of their lives together. Then, he pulls his mask on and prepares to take his revenge. First, he goes to a tavern that criminals seem to frequent. He gets his hand on one named Turk and interrogates him very nicely for some information on who hired Bullseye. By nicely, I mean he dangles him off the roof. Daredevil shows up to the party where it seems McCabe's has hired a bunch of people to try to take Daredevil down, but not a single one of them has what it takes. Eventually, Daredevil makes it up to McCabe's where he's revealed to be Mysterio. That was pretty short, but to be fair, most of the issue was Daredevil fighting his way up to the penthouse Mysterio was in. So, issue 7, here we come. This entire issue is full of exactly what the heck Mysterio's doing. Mysterio tells Daredevil that the baby's alive, but only has 15 minutes of air left, so he better listen to what he has to say. For a little while, he laments on how no one knows who Quentin Beck is, even though he's created illusions and effects that rival filmmakers. He's also upset about how often he lost Spider-Man, but enough of that. Let's hear his story about how he became Daredevil's bane of existence rather than Spider-Man's. It all started when he was diagnosed with cancer, a brain tumor and lung cancer. He was given a year to live. From there, he vowed to face his undoing in a dramatic battle to the death with his most hated foe. Those were his words. However, in Mysterio's absence, he discovered that the People's Spider-Man was not his Spider-Man, but a clone. Remember the clone saga I mentioned in the timeline episode? Yeah, that's where it's mentioned here. So Mysterio set his eyes upon Daredevil and paid the Kingpin $1 million to tell him everything about Daredevil, and that he did. He was able to make up everything about the baby being a virgin birth. He also hired Lydia to tell Foggy whatever he wanted before he had someone else make sure she ceased to exist. He even fabricated Karen's diagnosis, which ultimately led to her death. Finally, Daredevil had enough. He disables Mysterio's suit, but instead of killing him, which is what Quentin wants, he refuses and simply asks where the baby is. A hidden door opens, revealing the baby, but then Mysterio pulls a gun, initially aiming it at Daredevil, but ultimately turning it on himself. Now, to wrap things up, we have a short intro page where we see Peter learning of Mysterio's death. He feels pretty conflicted and somewhat responsible. Mary Jane reassures him and tells him to mourn for those who deserve it. Then we cut to Karen's funeral. No words are spoken by Matt about Karen. He can't bring himself to do it, but he does schedule a meeting with Peter later. They meet as their costumed counterparts, and Peter shares his advice for losing a loved one at the hands of a villain. For reference, we're talking about Gwen Stacy here. Peter reassures Matt that at least he saved the baby's life, and hopefully that's enough for now. Matt also receives a sizable sum of money from Karen's life insurance policy. Knowing she would want him to spend it on himself instead of donate it, he decides to open Nelson and Murdoch, a new law firm. Thankfully, Foggy was released from prison, but Liz does end up leaving him because, well, he did cheat. That being said, neither Matt nor Foggy wanted to work for Rosalind anymore because she didn't lift a finger to prove her son's innocence. So they're going to open their own firm. Matt also makes his way to Natasha's to apologize for the way he treated her when he was under the influence of the toxin. A lot is said, but she ends up forgiving him. He also visits his mother in the hospital and finds out the baby was adopted by a childless couple in New Jersey. He was also given the privilege of naming the baby girl, and he named her Karen. The end shows Matt back at confession. He states he had a crisis of faith, but that it's been restored. Then, in the middle of confession, he hears a child in a burning building. With a smile, he changes into his costume right there in the booth. And that's Guardian Devil. When I first read this issue as I started reading the continuity guide, it was amazing. I really loved the depth of storytelling and how the character development worked from issues 1 all the way to 8. I would highly recommend reading this yourself if you have access to it. I also think that it's really important to know this story because it sets up a lot of future Daredevil stories. The art of this arc is incredibly expressive, and I really like the tone that Quesada used for the series. Next time on Diving into Marvel Comics, we'll be taking a look at a pair of Black Widow arcs from 1999 and 2001. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you then.